So who was this elusive woman who took these thousands of photographs? Often full of tenderness, like a parent's, but always from the outside. All these were taken in the 50s and 60s when she was working as a nanny in the suburbs north of Chicago. She worked in several houses, but for by far the longest time with a family called the Ginsbergs.
Vivian's family, they were very much a hub of that neighborhood. And I think she probably enjoyed it. Enjoyed the energy that flowed from their family. It was a prosperous community, probably predominantly Jewish. It was really a neighborhood in a very old-fashioned way. We ice skated, we went to the beach. She rode a bicycle. We all rode bicycles, children, but the grown-ups seldom did. And she always had her camera. I remember Vivian taking photographs of the kids as they were just lounging around and being surprised that there was no eye contact. She was just into her viewfinder. And it was fascinating to see somebody who was part of the group, but also had found a way to wall herself off from it.
Her favorite camera helped with this.
This is the same model as her first Rolleiflex. This opens.
Artist and lecturer Pamela Banos showed us how. She's been researching Vivian's life, work, and tools.
So we look through this viewfinder, which you can see how difficult that is to see, to get accustomed to. She looks straight down and out. So this is called a twin lens camera. You're actually looking through this upper lens, and the photograph is being made through the lower lens. One thumb would turn this dial, the other thumb would turn this dial. We press that button and we've made the picture. Down in there
to look down in a camera means you're not making eye contact with people. And for a woman photographer, it was a good disguise. Because to be out on the streets, you had to have the personality for it, but you also needed a tool that allowed you to stay invisible. And she looked like a school mom. She looked innocent. It allowed her to get into the living space of lots of people.
When I look back at all the pictures, she was clearly focusing in on the relationship of children and their parents. Some of it was very sweet, but some of it was, I think, maybe judgmental. It may also have been that she was noticing something about that community, some kind of edginess, and picking up on it. The camera presented this magical transition for her that allowed her to see people and to get places without being caught doing it. And people allowed it because she wasn't there. She was just in the viewfinder.
In order to live in someone else's family and care for their kids, you have to be both present and absent at the same time. And she knew how to achieve that kind of balance, and she carried it out, it seems to me, in her work on the street too. She's definitely non-threatening.
Her eye was so excellent for catching not just the character of the people she was photographing, but also the moment in history. She got Chicago in the 50s and early 60s in a very precise way. She got the things that that made it that moment. There was always a degree of separation between Vivian and everyone else. She was clearly a recluse.
This house here was my dad's dental office, and upstairs was a room that Dad had given to Miss Meyer to stay. She actually completely filled the room with newspapers and pictures and stuff, so much that my dad had to put a steel jack underneath to hold the floor up, and he couldn't figure out why the ceiling was sagging.
She did hoard things, and she brought a lot of possessions into the house. Her bedroom initially was very simple, and in no short order, she ended up bringing in all her possessions, boxes, newspapers, lots of clothes, lots of different items, and it got to the point where this sparsely populated room was unbelievably crowded, and in fact you had to almost narrow your way in on the occasions that she let you in, because she was very, very private.
It was really, really strange to see so many pictures of myself. I saw a few pictures, and I was very little.
Framed again.
But after that, no. I mean, she kept them all to herself, so no, I had no clue.
My mom was a photography editor for newspapers. She worked with a lot of photographers, but Miss Meyer never, ever showed her any of the photos. So it was kind of unusual that way.
I always called her Miss Myers, and that was what she wanted me to call her, or my parents. Never Vivian, and she would take your head off if you used anything else. Sometimes she would hand the box camera to me, and she wanted me to take a picture of herself.
And I think you took that picture.
Let's see, have her head cut off, and yeah. Now, that would be me. She wanted that focus of that camera just so. And she'd be frustrated because she didn't think I could get it to the point where she wanted it. She told me about the importance of the contrast between dark and light. When we go on our walks, she'd take me all over the place.
After she got done with supper, she would leave and she would walk to this train station and headed towards Chicago area.
The next outbound metro train from Chicago is now arriving.
That's all we knew. I never heard where she went. She never told anybody. And she would be very angry if we asked.
Whenever she could, Vivian would take the train from the northern suburbs where she worked to downtown Chicago.
Doors closing.
The pictures that we're looking at were all taken within just a few blocks of here. The man sitting by an old subway station. Probably would have been taken right here. It was kind of panhandling. It was such a contrast to the life that she was leading in the suburbs. She was looking for people. The best way to capture the energy of a city and to understand the city is on the streets. She wasn't on a tour bus. She wasn't from afar. She was down at street level.
Some of them aren't quite down and out, are they? Some of them are elderly people who are sort of rather ornate in their own way.
It's funny because as you look at these different pictures, so many were taken on this corner. The Marshall Fields clocks were kind of a meeting place. People would say, "Meet me under the Marshall Fields clock."
The camera is an instrument of detection. We photograph not only what we know, but also what we don't know.
We're going on to the south side to meet Sarah Poretsky, a detective writer whose heroine also walked these mean streets. The dangers of this area, wandering around here, I mean, how do you see that mystery woman side of Vivian?
My sense of her was that she didn't think about it, that she was so focused on her quest that she didn't think about whether she was personally at risk. I think she had an intense interest in people who, in some ways, were like her and were on the margins of the more glittery world that she worked for but wasn't part of. I think it can be reassuring to know that you're not alone in that kind of outsider world. And also, you know, she worked hard for a living, and these are people who worked hard for a living. I also get a sense of a kind of a loneliness or ennui that is really painful. And I wonder if she selected those shots out of her own sense of loneliness. She must have felt that there was something about her that was rootless, that wasn't weighted down, and that as many images as she could take somehow gave her weight.
Photography can be kind of a lonely profession. It is something that one actually has a lot of alone time with. That's probably part of her success. She had a lot of alone time. This is how she managed to do what she did. She actually was the personification of finding art. She walked into a picture, she saw it happening, she took a picture, and she left.
Camera shop staff like Pat were among the few who ever got to see any of Vivian's pictures.
She mostly showed me street scenes, sometimes some pretty bad neighborhoods. This woman was going on foot. I'm honestly surprised that she just emerged unscathed. She would have been prey to someone who would have wanted the camera or something.
I've been here since I was 14, and I can remember her sort of coming in as early as that. And it didn't matter the weather outside, but mainly it was late in the afternoons. Yeah, she wore heavy shit-kicker shoes. Long skirts, dark clothing, wintertime heavy coats, lots of scarves. She treated people as people, and whether she liked people, that was another story that day, or she didn't like people that day. And she did not like women who were trying to act like women. If you had makeup on, I think she basically would cut you off. Men, aggressive or too many questions, goodbye. Could someone else take care of me? I mean, she was right to the point. Sometimes, very rarely, she would open up the roll to decide. She said, come here, and you know, you can look at them with me, but not too often. Mainly it was private. I don't honestly remember the pictures. Just that it was black and white and it was people, things.
With her Rolleiflex, she had just 12 shots and then had to reload the film. Not easy in the open air. She shot about a roll of film a day. She spent virtually all her earnings on film, equipment and storage. Unlike most photographers, Vivian tended to take just one shot and move on. Her hit rate was phenomenal.
This is a roll of film and the order in which they were taken. It's kids getting on a bus in the morning for school. She drops them off, and then she heads downtown, and she starts photographing. You really get this sense of a day in the life or of a diary here, and you can see how she moves through the street. If you put it all in a row, you would see one woman's life unfolding on film. In this way, you'd have an unbroken string of images of what she saw, of what her experiences were. This is what her big project was. It was her life. It was experiencing life through photography. She'll come upon somebody who seems to be either in crisis or contemplating something. People who seem to be kind of lost in a world of deep thought. And she was able to capture this image. And this is really a portrait. It's a portrait of a person. It's not just a shot of a random person walking down the street. She's captured a real raw emotion here.
As interested as she was in other people, she gave away very little about herself.
My father hired her in part because she had a European background, which my father did as well. Oftentimes, around the dinner table, for example, they would speak in French. Vivian was a rather opinionated woman. She had political leanings that I think were more on the left and feminist, but I would say that wholly apart from her political opinions is perhaps the way that she carried them off. She was an extremely abrasive person, and oftentimes it was pretty much in your face, and that was Vivian. When people tried to elicit information about her, she would quickly change the topic, but in terms of her upbringing and background, it was nothing that I ever really got to know.
She was creating a play for children in the backyard, and she was assigning roles to all the children. They said, well, what role are you going to play? And she just looked around and said, I'll be the mystery woman. There were times when the parents would ask her, so you lived in France, was that during the occupation? And she'd respond, maybe. So she really enjoyed having this air of mystery. And I think the mystery is still there.
In just the area of Chicago where Vivian lived, Pamela Banos is doing forensic research on what she calls Vivian Maier's fractured archive, split between the different owners.
These are ones that Vivian chose.
That she chose to save.
She's also digging deep into Vivian's mysterious past.
Hold in her hand and look at.
I see Vivian Maier as a woman who is the product of the legacy of the French women before her. She is the daughter of a woman who was the daughter of another woman who were all live-in servants in New York. She is also today somebody else entirely who I think has been invented by people who love a good story, maybe. Her grandmother, Eugenie Jussot, had a child out of wedlock at the age of 16. She left the Champs-Élysées Valley of France, sort of a shamed woman. She arrives in New York in 1901, leaving her baby behind, and then essentially becomes a live-in cook for the rest of her life.
So Vivian's grandmother, Eugenie, leaves her illegitimate daughter behind in France to become a cook. And then what happens?
In 1914, her daughter, Maria Jussot, arrives in Manhattan, traveling with an American woman as her private maid. She was in New York, never having seen her mother.
In 1919, Vivian's mother married her father, an Austro-Hungarian, Charles Meyer. And on her marriage certificate, she changes her parents' names to make it look as though she's legitimate.
She corrects the family history. So she sort of invents herself at this point, at least on paper. This Vivian Maier story is filled with intrigue and secrecy and deception and privacy, which I think is a theme that goes throughout.
Vivian told people she was born in France, but in fact she was born in Manhattan in 1926. Aged 4, Vivian was living in St. Mary's Street in the Bronx with her mother, but without her father or her elder brother. But there's a woman living with them from a neighbouring village in France, a studio photographer, Jeanne Bertrand. Maybe she had some influence on Vivian, the photographer-to-be. Jeanne Bertrand had had an illegitimate child whom she'd given up to adoption, and she'd since had a mental breakdown.
We have these French women with no families. We have babies with no fathers. We have this connection of women who are displaced, who then end up living with other families or give their children to other families or give their children up.
Vivian Maier appears to have had very few personal relationships. She certainly never got married. We don't know of any other relationship. So that would suggest this displacement comes from the circumstances.